My name is Lenora Claire. I am a multi-violent crime survivor, an advocate, an activist, a longtime entertainment industry professional, and now I also work as a private investigator. Back in 2011, it was a different time. I had opened up my art gallery. It was a great source of pride. I got a bunch of media at the time, tons of coverage, and a man who I did not know, who already had a long history of stalking people, where he was arrested, a lot of violent acts, very mentally unwell. And I want to say that I'm not stigmatizing people who have mental illness. It's just kind of an important factor in explaining my story. He had been arrested for stalking Ivanka Trump. So weird that this is part of my story, but it is, out in New York. And he came to Los Angeles. He opened up a magazine. He saw me. He became fixated. He came to my gallery. He was wearing a spacesuit. And when you work in the arts, you're used to dealing with all kinds of creative, fun characters. So it's not abnormal to talk to a kooky guy in a spacesuit, right? And he looked at me and he said, "You look Jessica Rabbit." And I said, "Oh, okay, thanks." And he said, "I'm going to stalk you." Like, he looked me right in the eye and told me that. And I just thought it was a bizarre interaction. I kind of removed him from the gallery. I didn't think much of it. It was just kind of a weird thing. And then shortly after, my friends who I told that this had happened to were sending me news articles like, "Oh no, this guy is a convicted stalker," because the Trumps had hired bounty hunters to extradite him and take him back to New York. So this was like in the news. They're like, "That's the guy that was weird to you." And so he was taken by the bounty hunters to serve in New York and Rikers Island, where he started writing me these really terrifying letters. And they very quickly escalated to very graphic death and sexual assault threats that he was writing and sending to my gallery. At first, the letters were escalating very quickly, and I took them to law enforcement. I was like, okay, here's somebody with a long criminal history. I have this mountain of evidence, right, that appeared very credible. And LAPD, Northeast Division, they told me to dye my hair and get off the internet. That was their advice to me. And I'm like, no, these are graphic and death threats. Like, you have to do something. You have to have some level of intervention. And they were so dismissive. And if anything, they victim blamed and shamed me. So I dealt with that for a while. It was terrifying. And so that's when I started to do things like, he would send me emails, and he bounced all over the country. So that's where I started learning how to track IP so that I could know what level of danger I was in. So people they laugh about the sort of journey to PI. I'm like, well, you sort of become what you need to be to survive. So I'd say that's where it started. And yeah, I would know how much danger I was in. If he was in California, I was on high alert. If he was out of state, I could kind of breathe that way. And then it got really bad. When you're a stalking survivor, everything about your life changes. A lot of us relocate, right? Your relationships are impacted in such a great way. Your career is impacted. And so the first big thing for me was giving up my business, but that's what I had to do to be safe. I know a lot of people don't have that option. I moved from that into working in television because I was kind of protected. I was in a big office. There was a lot of people around versus just being at a gallery on the street by myself all day. I think it was a week later, I did my first television show telling my story, begging for help. And that was the first time they teamed me up with this amazing woman named Rhonda Saunders, who I'm very good friends with. And she was the LA stalking prosecutor. She did many famous cases, Madonna stalker, Steven Spielberg stalker. And she was on the show with me, and I learned that she was very responsible for getting so the first stalking laws in the country were in California. We're always first. And she was directly responsible for having them get made. And so that's where the advocacy and activism really kicked up in me. I was like, oh my God, you did this. And she's become a real mentor to me. So I'm so grateful that I did that show, even though I didn't get immediately get any help from LAPD. It teamed me up with Rhonda, and that's where the activism and everything the light went over my head, like, oh, I can do these things about it. When I started doing media, it was crazy because, they sort of it's a weird thing to be, but I kind of became the face of stalking in America. Like, Vice magazine did an article on me that went really viral. They called me the Aaron Brockovich of stalking, which is so much to live up to. But the reason why they said that was because I was really shining a light on this crime. And that's when I started, like I said, doing restraining orders for people. I do court support. I go to court with people. I kind of help them through that process. And eventually, I went on to the LA District Attorney for 4 years. I was on their Crime Victims Advisory Board, so I advised for gender-based violence, best practices and policy within the office. So I was kind of putting myself in this role where people hadn't really been before, and specifically for stalking. So when you put yourself out there as a face of a crime where people typically don't want attention, they're like, please, like, that's the last thing I need because it's gonna, upset my stalker, or they have children with this person. So here I am becoming the face of a thing which is usually like really hidden, to be honest. So what that did was it made everybody who was being underserved and not helped and terrified, like they would Google stalking, they would see me, and then they would write me. So I was just getting bombarded with people, and I would explain to them like how to obtain a restraining order, how to serve a restraining order, because that's a whole other thing. Restraining orders don't go into effect until they're served. So even if the court says you can have it, if the person evades or you don't know where they live, it's not happening. And then even if you get a restraining order, it doesn't mean it's going to be enforced. Like I had 4,000 violations. That's right, 4,000 death threats once my restraining order was served, and no one did anything. And they were supposed to do something on all of those. So even if you do the thing, it doesn't mean that you're going to get the intervention and help that you need. So as far as the positive impact, really creating a community for other survivors to connect with each other, to speak with. Again, it's not something people talk about. So this could be happening to you or your loved one, and they're not reaching out, connecting with other people. So, I was able to do that. I was able to be in a lot of rooms that people don't usually have access to, whether it was district attorney, politicians, and trying to like help inform some policy. So that was really amazing because I was sort of this, it's like, I don't want to say influencer, but kind of, I don't have a better word for this particular crime. I started working with Spark, who is this amazing organization, and eventually we all went to the White House Department of Justice together. So had I not been public, I wouldn't have connected with a group like that. So that's amazing. And the negative, there's quite a bit of negative. When I was single, boy, did it make dating hard, because people Google you and it's already hard to date in Los Angeles, let alone, they sit down and they're like, so I like you, but are you gonna get me killed? And you're like, this is like a second date. How are we having this conversation? That happened a lot. And, even well-intentioned loved ones, because people don't know how to handle this. Like they wanted to help, but they didn't know what to do. So they just didn't say anything. And the more public I got with it, the more that it freaked them out, because it was like more real versus if I just like didn't say anything and internalized it. So I was really kind of forcing the people in my life to confront the reality of what was happening to me, which is a weird experience. But I would say the most complicated, because I do believe the producers are well-intentioned. I myself am a producer, so I understand that. When we were shooting the 48 Hours episode, which was a huge platform, and it was an amazing opportunity, and you have to remember, I wasn't doing this for fun. This was so that I wouldn't get killed. And so I was on a 2-hour episode with some other people who were actively being stalked. And the producers, and you have to remember, true crime, they're used to dealing with homicides. So they're not used to active investigation with living survivors. It's a whole other thing when you're telling a homicide story. So they made the decision, without consenting me, without telling me, to interview my stalker, which I understand that they did that as producers because, boy, that's compelling television. And when you see that footage, it's terrifying. And the positive for me in that was that it validated what I was telling everyone. I was saying, this man is terrifying. This man is going to kill me or somebody else. And once you see him going off in this manner, you're like, she's right. So unfortunately, it took 17 million people seeing my stalker going off to believe me, right? So most people don't have a television show interviewing their stalker to prove their claims. I did, so that was the benefit. The negative, so 48 Hours didn't tell me. I didn't know that that happened until he got interviewed and immediately started blowing up my email saying, oh my God, we're gonna be in a TV show together. Because my stalker has, he's schizoaffective, which is schizophrenic, bipolar, and he also has something called erotomania, which is a psychiatric disorder where he has a false relationship with me. So he thinks we're married, right? So this really for him merged us together more than we're on a show together. They're telling our love story. Like, it just spiraled him out. So not long after the 48 Hours aired, most stalkers don't do this. Most stalkers are slick, right? They're not gonna write what they're gonna do to you. They're not gonna give you the evidence because they know you'll take that to court. But mine is, he's riding his own wave, we'll just say that. And he wrote me and he said he was gonna come kidnap me from LA Comic-Con. And I tried to get LAPD to help me, but they just didn't, or I'm not really sure why, but I worked with the owners of LA Comic-Con, who were amazing, and we had extra security, and they were dressed up like Batman and Robin and everything. And so the kids were never in danger. They really did a fantastic job. And when he came to kidnap me, we caught him. So we caught him and we turned him into LAPD. And I should also note, he was also stalking Kim Kardashian and Gwyneth Paltrow at the time. So I thought for sure like their security teams would catch him, but no, it was me. I caught him. And we had $1 million bail, which is kind of unheard of. There was some kind of an incident. To this day, I can't really speak on it. I just know what was reported, which is there was some incident with my stalker and Gwyneth Paltrow's children, but I don't really know what happened. So I'm sure that's why when I finally got him, they're like, okay, $1 million bail. I mean, that's usually $1 million bail is like homicide. You don't get that for stuff like stalking. I think survivors need to do whatever they need to do, right? For some, it's just living a peaceful, quiet life. For others, it's advocacy. For me, that was how I gave meaning to my experience. But again, I'm not saying that that's for everybody, because there is a lot of compassion fatigue. I take in everybody else's trauma all day long, or I have to deliver not great news, like, well, this is how the system is, and this is what you're gonna have to expect. And it's really hard to tell people that, right? Like, it's very hard to be their like trauma Sherpa. It's a rough thing. But again, for me, if I could take my experience and help somebody else kind of be that person that I needed, that was what was best for me. So I'm really grateful and honored that I got to do that. And then part of my advocacy, last year we had an amazing experience. Myself and a group of other survivors were invited to speak at the White House, which was amazing. And there was a really large grant that came from that, which was intended to train law enforcement and get like some, tech capabilities, because a lot of this crime now has a tech component. And if they don't know how to remove a tracker from your car or get that evidence, you're not gonna be able to prosecute. So incredibly proud of that. We also spoke at Department of Justice and the Office of Violence Against Women. So, I mean, that's pretty incredible to get to represent the community and other people like that. It was pretty transformative. So many things lined up in this way that I had these opportunities, and I just went like, because remember, I had nothing to lose. I'm like, this man's gonna kill me, right? So I have to be as loud. I have to do the thing. I have to try, and it may not work, right? And it may make dating harder. It may make jobs didn't want to hire me. That's the other thing too. People were so terrified. And sure enough, plenty of places that like there was actually, I was doing casting at the time, and when you work freelance, they just don't bring you back, right? So my stalker started sending my boss death threats, and he was like, everybody's terrified, right? So I lost one job from that. And then when my stalker went to jail later, he hired me back. So clearly it wasn't my work. It was just, I was a scary liability. And I'd love to talk a little bit too about the weirdness of, so everybody always sort of has this idea of justice, right? Like, oh, if you get, what is justice anyway? Like, am I safer? I put my stalker in jail, I think 6 times now. He still stalks me. He still stalks other people. I mean, I'm so glad that I removed a threat from the community for a period of years, but my stalker has literally spent years in jail over stalking me. And he was trying to write me letters from jail. So there's nothing about that was helping, right? And so much of the conversation to me, like, yeah, there's justice, but there's also the idea of healing and what that looks like and what that means and what you need to do to feel safe. And for me, it was learning, threat assessment and risk minimization. It was, what do I need to do to be safe? And I feel really, so much that I have a PI business where I do this for other people. But for me, that was the important thing, was the healing. And for me, the healing came through feeling protected and the knowledge. And again, and also accepting I'm never fully safe. But with my case specifically, it's so rare to get I got a felony. So stalking in California, it's a wobbler. And a wobbler is a crime that can be a misdemeanor or a felony. And if it's a misdemeanor, they may just get like a fine, like it's nothing. So my case was so egregious that it was a felony. But when he came to kidnap me, he was not successful in doing that. He didn't, I think it's more than 10 feet off the ground, like from where you are. And so he didn't actually get to do that because we intercepted. So we didn't get any, even though his intention was to kill me, we didn't get any of those charges. But we did get stalking for felony level, which is huge, right? And in California, we have a proposition, and I understand why people voted for it. Like, if I didn't know, I would have voted for it too. And the way the proposition was worded was that nonviolent offenders get reduced sentencing, which sounds great. If someone did something nonviolent, they shouldn't really be incarcerated for a long time. So even though I got felony stalking, which was 4 years, it's immediately cut in half. So you only serve 2. So even when you get the conviction, which is so rare, right? There's things like that. And the other thing that was really weird for me was we were gonna have a trial, right? Like, so I'm walking up the courthouse steps, I have my victim impact statement, like I'm ready to do this. This is now, because my stalker was arrested in 2017 and then he was in holding for a year. We're supposed to have the trial 2018. So I've now waited a year. I'm walking up the courthouse steps and the stalking district attorney comes out and he goes, "We took a plea." What do you mean? What do you mean? Because they don't want to do trials. It's really expensive. It can be like $1 million to do a trial. So they took a plea, and he's like, but don't worry, you got a felony. So I was just kind of like, okay. And he's like, I'm like, okay, well, can I give my victim impact statement? And he's like, I don't think that's a good idea for you, because being in the same room as him is just going to make him obsess on you harder. So I didn't even get the satisfaction. And I think he was correct in that. I think it would have riled him up. Not to mention being in the same room is a terrible experience. But even, so that's what I'm saying about the ideas of like justice and what that means. It's like, it's never what you think it's going to be. And I think survivors, a lot of the time, we keep having these like goalposts, like, oh, if I get this, I'll be okay. Oh, if this happens, it's like you have to sort of release yourself of that and just be like, I need to do what I need to do today, because healing isn't linear, and I have good days and I have bad days, right? So it's just, I always tell survivors that, like, don't say, oh, if X, Y, and Z, because X, Y, and Z is never going to happen the way you think it is. And then even if it does happen, it doesn't mean you're suddenly okay. When I first came forward, right? So I think I first went public maybe like 2015. It was prior to Me Too. And there was no real stalking community. It was really quiet. Even just survivors really weren't public about their experience. So there was like no community. But as soon as I started telling my story, people started coming to me, and I would create like Zoom chats where I would just get a whole bunch of us and it'd be like, sorry you're in the club no one wants to be in, but we're all here. And that's when I realized, like, I talk about this a lot. I started making friendships with a lot of survivors. And at first I was like, oh, are we just connecting because we're traumatized in the same way? And I'm like, no, that really does a disservice. These are all incredible people, right? People who I'd be friends with legitimately if it wasn't for this. And that's when I started coming up with, I call it my extra sparkly theory, which is where stalkers and predators are often, because they always say on crime shows like so-and-so lit up a room. Like, that's not a joke. It's because a lot of times the survivors are really charismatic, dynamic, successful in their given field. And these predators who are nothing, they want to obtain, possess, and control, all of which they are not. So they see this sparkly person and they are drawn and they want to own you, they want to possess you. So when I'm meeting with other survivors, I'm like, these people are all awesome. These are all really wonderful people. And it's important also to get us together, because a lot of times, I think especially if your abuser is someone you had a relationship with, it's different, because people who are in that experience, they feel like, oh, I chose this person. And they have a guilt that I don't have. And I feel so bad for all of them because, I've also had partners. So I understand that. But it's just a different feeling. And so when you look out in this group of other survivors and you're like, oh, it's not just me. I wasn't, there's not something about me that drew this bad person, or I made a bad judgment. You like look at all these people and you're like, you're all really cool people. And I think it helps sort of validate that there's nothing wrong with you, right? And you see these people and you go, well, I wouldn't judge them when I hear their stories. So I'm going to release the feelings of guilt and shame I may have for myself. So that's why, community is so important. Also, there's just things that only we understand. Like, I remember talking to my friend about, because she had a plea deal too, and I'm like, isn't that crazy? You're so ready to do the thing, right? And then you can't do the thing. You're like, I know. And so when you connect with other survivors, you're able to have these conversations and just really get each other. And just having that support is so meaningful. I think the fact that my dad was a psychiatrist, I was always sort of taught that, like, people have issues. It doesn't make them a bad person. I think that's where that comes from. I think that I also just have a high threshold of trying to be understanding and empathetic. Again, sometimes that's also come to bite me because I've been really forgiving in ways that maybe I shouldn't have been. So now it's like finding like appropriate boundaries and, just not just going, oh, well, this person is, it's you still have to see somebody for what they are. But yeah, I definitely think my dad being a psychiatrist was probably really impactful on kind of how I walk through the world. So I had an amazing over-the-top wedding. And the reason that's just true to me. And I was so happy that I found healthy love and everything. But my stalker was in jail for 1 more month. We got married a month before because I didn't want to worry about his release. And by the way, when he was released after serving years, he was stalking me within 3 days. He was making YouTube videos about me. But I had this amazing wedding, right? And I was really public with my wedding. I had like friends from Drag Race in the wedding, and like I had mermaids. It was just like a really over-the-top, amazing Fellini-esque wedding. And I had it, and it was really public because I wanted to show survivors, like, you can be like me, you can be multi-victim, you could have so much trauma, and you are still deserving of love, healthy love, right? And so I wanted to share that with people. What you're feeling is real, because I think we instinctively know when something doesn't feel right. We know when something feels elevated. There's oh, this makes me uncomfortable. And then there's I am terrified. So if you're feeling that, there's legitimacy to that. And at that point, hopefully somebody can do a risk assessment. There's something called SHARP, which people can do online for free, which does a risk assessment for you. And it helps you know what level of danger that you're in. So I always send that to people to sort of, you can kind of, does it fit the checklist, right? Are you being targeted? Does this person have a plan? It's all this stuff. So definitely validating if you're feeling something, there's something to it, right? And then hopefully getting this sort of assessment as to what's happening, and then hopefully intervention. That could be law enforcement. For me, I have my PI company, which is when people are not being, properly handled by law enforcement. So my partner, so this is funny. So I had one really great detective at LAPD who retired, and that's Cletus. And he is somebody who, after he retired, I would have, victim survivors coming to me for help, and I would call him and I'd be like, so-and-so, the police aren't listening to her. Can you be her liaison? And he would jump in and help. And then he started this PI company with Leo, who's our other partner. And, they started doing all this work. Again, Cletus was at the threat management unit, so that's his background. He does missing persons and stalking. So I would send him people, and then the entertainment industry during COVID, started falling apart. And so he was like, why don't you come work for us? Why don't you? And I was like, oh, okay. And that's when I didn't even mention, I trained with the FBI last year. I did the FBI Citizens Academy. It was great. We got to do stuff with the SWAT team. I've done a lot of threat assessment, lone actor terrorism training. So I have certifications to do this. It's not just a vibe check. I actually am trained to do it. Just one thing I'm going to say about stalking is it's a crime that doesn't discriminate. It can happen to anyone, just like anyone can be a perpetrator. It happens to every gender, race, orientation. It really does. And the only commonality is we're all underserved. We're all underrepresented. So definitely think about that. And, if you need help, seek help. This is not something that you can handle on your own. It's not something that will likely just go away. Sometimes it does. Sometimes stalkers just find someone else. That does happen sometimes. Or they're like mine and they stalk someone else and return to you. So definitely get intervention. And there are things you could do to protect yourself, and if people have questions, they can reach out to me. Like I said, I do my best to try and answer everybody. Sometimes it's physically impossible, but at the very least, I can help them get resources and point them to the right people if I can't. If I don't know someone in their jurisdiction, I may not be able to get the best detective in Amarillo, Texas. I may not know anyone there, but I'll do my best to help you.